Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. I am excited to introduce Javier Zamora and Jenny Xu tonight, not so much from my perspective as a poet as from my life as a reader. And by reader, I don't think I mean merely to say that I am a lover of words and ideas, but that I've come to regard my reading practice as an emblem of this fact. I am a 21st century human making my way through a world that seems almost pointed in its attempt to distract me from the real, from the eternal. The voices I cleave to on the page are those capable of guiding me to the place within the ongoing and the terrible, where my attention and my intention might begin to make a difference. These remarkable young poets urge my gaze outward and my listening inward. In their harrowing honesty and their quiet wisdom, I feel myself to be ageless, patient, newly courageous, and freshly bereft. In other words, I feel myself alive in a different way, one that has been tampered with, recalibrated, infused with sudden astonishment and urgency. Javier Zamora's debut collection, Unaccompanied, tells the story of the poet's journey from El Salvador to the United States as a 9-year-old. It also tells the stories many of us in this country have never heard, perhaps never listened for. The story of a family that must make the decision to flee the social upheaval of violence and war. The story of what has set such upheaval into motion and what perpetuates it. Zamora tells the story of the many horrors and tendernesses that characterize such a journey, and the divided consciousness rooted in 2 languages, 2 homes, 2 versions of selfhood and of history that accompany every search for refuge. I love the range of these poems, written from the fullness of Zamora's many selves, and the ways they manage to haunt me. At one end of this volume's spectrum of poetic tones, stances, approaches, and means of submitting to its material, there is the documentary sense of what has happened, as in these lines from For Israel and Maria Los Angeles. My uncle Israel and his fiancée Maria were among the first victims of the war in my hometown. Renato Quintanilla, the high school teacher's brother, force-injected my uncle with a mixture of unidentified drugs. A few days later, Maria was raped and murdered by 3 soldiers under the command of Sargento Cachaca. And somewhere further down the spectrum, there's the psychic sense of inheriting such a history and having withstood the journey to safety, as in these lines from Dancing in Buses. Look to the right, as if crossing streets. Look to the left, slowly, as if balancing orange baskets. Bend as if picking cotton. Do the rump. Straighten up as if dropping firewood. Rake. Do the rake. Sweep. Do the sweep. Do the pupusa clap. Finger dough clumps. Clap. Do the horchata scoop. Your hand's a ladle. Scoop. Reach and scoop. Now duck. They're shooting. Duck under the seat and don't breathe. What I cherish about Unaccompanied is the way the psychic toll of migration reaches me in so many different languages: lyric, intellectual, visceral, emotional. I feel reading these poems as if Zamora is teaching me not just to carry the weight of his own story, but to wear it. He's outfitting me with this story, which is the story of a nation, or rather 2 nations, one of them being mine, which is to say ours. He is teaching me how to feel what I have been a part of all along. He is teaching me to help carry this burden that has always been partly mine. In Jenny Xu's debut collection, Eye Level, we encounter a speaker in transit through Hanoi and Phnom Penh, Greece, and other global destinations, as well as through the vast inner landscapes of memory, longing, and knowledge. And what seems to drive Shu's eye and ear and mind is wisdom, which can't be taught, but which the wise have somehow managed, perhaps across lifetimes, to accumulate. I think wisdom is like math, evidence of an order so large we can only grasp parts of it at a time, but we recognize it. We feel a kind of cellular satisfaction when confronted by the evidence of it. I feel that in these lines from Rootless. The mind resides both inside and out. It can think itself and think itself into existence. And in these lines from old wives' tales on which I was fed. You'll wreck your eyesight poring over pages in low light, but looking at all things green from a distance can coax it back. And in these lines from Zuihitsu, which make me cry every time I read them. When I was 4, I ate spoonfuls of powdered milk straight from the canister. The powder was sweet. There wasn't enough money for fresh milk. 700 years ago, Chang Yang Hao wrote, "All my life seems like yesterday morning." Of course, there is a great deal here even below the cosmic heights of wisdom. I marvel at the pristine ear presiding over each of the poems in eye level, one attuned to music and sonic authority at every turn. Indeed, sound is one of the collection's most persuasive mechanisms, conjuring places, spaces, and a particular tilt of mood and of mind. Another mechanism, not surprising for a book bearing I in its title, is the image. What Shu sees, what she has turned her heart toward, is both ravishing and ravaging. It draws me into a beautiful intimacy with the world, even the world's closed to me, that makes me aware of and grateful for my own vulnerabilities, those fostered by my strangeness, my sense of being only a passer through, of having, as background to all that I can see, only my own vocabulary, my own innate history. I say I here, where perhaps I should defer to Shu's speaker, because I feel myself so thoroughly invited into her stake in things, no matter where she is. Before welcoming Jenny to the stage, I want to show you once more why she is one of the poets whose voice anchors me to this earth and this bewildering life. These lines come from the opening and closing of her prose poem Bildungsroman, which takes its title from the German word for enlightenment novel or coming-of-age story. When the gates opened, some of us remained still. Others walked off with no one to call after them. What a sight it was. In front of our eyes, the wind whipped its subjects forth in tune with some strange choreography. You could walk into a name for yourself. You could walk into a fear of being robbed of your life. Please welcome Jenny Shu, who will be followed by Javier Zamora.
Good evening. Thank you to Tracy for that exquisite introduction. It is a complete honor to be reading with two writers that I think the world of. Javier, whom I had the pleasure of meeting when I was a student in the NYU MFA program, and of course, Tracy, whom I am beyond lucky to call a teacher and a mentor. I was a student of Tracy's in college, and as a teacher, she had the ability to make you feel that your mind was vast and vivid and worthy of furnishing. And she engaged with your work with such seriousness and remarkable generosity that all you wanted was to commit to it too. I was a student of her many, many years ago, and I haven't stopped learning from her, and I suspect I never will. And I count it as this country's good fortune that she is now in a position to instruct and steer so many of us with her expansive ways of seeing and listening and being. So it's a complete honor. I'm going to begin with a beginning, this poem titled Origin Story. I was profligate like a floodlight to the sun, hoarded saccharin and tooth marks, wanted only the thickest rhymes, 2 of each. Full I was of promises I never intended to keep, puckered laughter, lines to feast. I let everyone who entered my life enter through me, demanded nonsense love and bodies that would ring, not to mention higher kilowatts of creeping joy, more red in everything. So in this book, Eye Level, the first section has its roots in the years I spent living abroad in Hong Kong and Cambodia, and these poems are about travel. And I was also thinking through the estrangement of travel, how when you are displaced, it encourages a kind of inner journeying. You write yourself into a place, and it writes itself into you, and encountering the unfamiliar outside of yourself, you're also, in many ways, encountering the unfamiliar and the strange within. So this next poem is titled Rootless. Between Hanoi and Sapa, there are clean slabs of rice fields and no 2 brick houses in a row. I mean, no 3. See, counting's hard in half sleep, and the rain pulls a sheet over the sugar palms and their untroubled leaves. Hours ago, I crossed a motorbike with a hog strapped to its seat, the size of a date pit from the distance. Can this solitude be rootless, unhooked from the ground? No matter. The mind resides both inside and out. It can think itself and think itself into existence. I sponge the eyes, no worse for wear. My frugal mouth spends the only foreign words it owns. At present, on the sleeper train, there's nowhere to arrive. Me? I'm just here in my traveler's clothes, trying on each passing town for size. This next poem is about a Greek island, Corfu. To the north and to the west, dark tips of cypress. Corfu in the slow math of July and this reservoir of fear running low. The island has 2 hard-boiled hills. The bus descends one of them, blaring folk ballads. Houses the color of custard, some burnt. A Greek Orthodox monastery where even female cats can't enter. I've never set foot on this island before, but all day a familiar version of this self insists, like a plain sweat stain against my back. Pickpocketed days ago in France, all my dollars and euros gone. Yesterday I landed in an airport so small I could see from one end to the other. I've grown lean from eating only the past. One line through customs and the plane impossibly close to the sea. No ceremony in any of it. The next 2 poems I'll read for you deal with the rifts and the ruptures of migration. I immigrated to the US at age 4, And I've been thinking about how immigration means that home is no longer this closed structure and how you are left with feelings of exile. This poem is titled Naturalization. His tongue shorn, father confuses snacks for snakes, kitchen for chicken. It is 1992. Weekends we paw at cheap silverware at yard sales. I am told by mother to keep our telephone number close, my beaded coin purse closer. I do this. The years are slow to pass, heavy-footed. Because the visits are frequent, we memorize shame's numbing stench. I nurse nosebleeds, run up and down stairways, chew the wind. Such were the times, all of us nearsighted. Grandmother prays for fortune to keep us around and on a short leash. The new country is ill-fitting, lined with cheap polyester, soiled at the sleeves. Exile. Here's to this new country, bald and without center, to its paper rooftops and dogs pink with mange, to pain, which cleans out everything, the fantasies that wouldn't take, ancient mistakes. Here's to the north and south of this lack and its mud. I feel my way around, to new nouns, to burning off like soft white butter set in a saucepan. This next poem was actually written for the 92nd Street Y's New Colossus, so a festival based on the Emma Lazarus poem. And it's thinking about our national narrative and the omissions in that narrative, what we choose or forget to see. And it's titled Private Property. Exhaustion slides from the body through the lips first. The invisible are flush with it. They drowse on blue subway seats. Heads bowed, yes, but to what? This island of concrete and glass tied by rough hands. The smell of this body among other bodies, negatives of another's pleasure. All of us living on loan, yet only some grasp the arrangement. Those shuttled back and forth, drifting to other far places. Underground, the window is also a mirror. It reflects sleep, chasing bodies back into the borderless empire of the interior. I'll read two more poems in sections. This next one is a multi-section poem about the complexity of seeing and being seen, how we come to know ourselves through the eyes of others, how we are regenerated so many times in a day from one pair of eyes and the next, and how we in turn call up others through our seeing, through our line of sight. Visual orders. 1. Harvest the eyes from the ocular cavities. Complete in themselves a pair of globes with their own meridians. 2. What atrophies without the tending of a gaze? The visible object is constituted by sight, but where to spend one's sight, a soft currency. To be profligate and taking in the outer world is to shortchange the interior one, though this assumes a clean separation, a zero-sum game. 3. to draw ink lines across the lids, to dip into small pots of pigment, to brush 24 times, to flush with water and tame with oil, to restrain and to spill in appropriate measure, to drink from the soft and silvery pain, to extract the root of the solitary so as to appear. 4. Describe how the interior looks. Cloak the eyes, close them, and seeing continues. 5. The seductions of seeing ensure there is that which remains unseen. Evading visibility is its own fortune. If to behold is to possess, to be looked upon is to be fixed in another sight, static and immutable. 6. She leans toward the mirror for self-study. The body canted. What gets left out? Uneasy depths. The fine, lithe needles of the mind. Endless conversation with no listener. 7. Self-consciousness anticipates an excess of seeing, its incessancy. Lacan writes, I see only from one point, but in my existence I am looked at from all sides. 8. Gazed upon, I lose union with the larger surround, broken from the trance of camouflage. 9. The acquisitive, insatiable I. A disembodied I cannot be confined to the skin and what it holds captive. Inversely, to be unseen against one's will is to be powerless, to be denied a reflection and to be locked out of a self. 10. What persists down the generations? The shape of an eyeball, translated by genes. Mine are long like my mother's and her mother's, who is all but blind. 11. Ancient optic theory dictates that the eye sends out rays, which touches the object of sight. When the visual ray returns to the eye, the image is impressed on the mind. To see, then, was tactile. That we are touchable makes us seen. 12. Sight is bounded by the eyes, making seeing a steady loss. The presence of the unseen is vaster than that which is exhausted by vision. We inhabit this incoherence. 13. Look at how I perform for you. Look at how you perform for me. An eye for an eye is how you and I take on forms in the mind. 14. Her gaze breaks each time at the same place. There was no reversing. Didn't she know? She has to go at it from the side. She has to keep circling. I'm going to end on a poem of fragments. This is one titled Zuhitsu, and that is a Japanese poetic form of various jottings, fragments that are bound together by associative logic. So in Japanese, Zuhitsu translates roughly into follow the brush. So you let the brush make its way without the mind interfering. Zuhitsu. Sunday, awake with this headache. I pull apart the evening with a fork, white clot behind the eyes. Someone once told me before and after is just another false binary. The warmed over bones of January. I had no passport. Beneath the stove, 2 mice made a paradise out of a button of peanut butter. Suffering operates by its own logic, its gropings and reversals, ample in ways that are exquisite, and how it leaves, not unlike how it arrives, without clear notice. These days, I've had my fill of Chinatown and its wet markets, gutted fish, overcooked chattering, the stench making me look hard at everything. Summer mornings before the heat has moved in. Joy has been buried in me overnight, but builds in the early hours, my attention elastic. The babbling streets of Causeway Bay, out of which the sharp taste of the city emerges. Nothing can stay dry here. The dark cherries of eyes come and go as they please. Let there be no more braiding of words. I want a spare mouth. My father taught me, wherever you are, always be looking for a way out. This opening or that one, or a question, sharp enough to slice a hole for you to slip through. Long car trips where I sat in the back of our family's used Nissan, the stale odor of plush seats, sun-warmed cola. My parents and my words do not touch. I grow adept at tunneling inward, a habit I've yet to let go of. I am protective of what the eyes cannot pry open, the unannounced, the infinite places within language to hide. A Zen priest once told me that without snagging on a storyline, the body can take loss for 90 seconds. The physical body has its limits, is what I heard. The imagination can break through them. Boiled peanuts, leather of daybreak, cotton thinning out into thread, dried vomit, ice water from the spigot. The sacred and profane share a border. In the desert, small droppings of unknown origin. Even when I was young, I loved peering at faces in films. The pleasure of watching and of not being watched. Black koi fish open their mouths at the skin of the pond for oxygen. At the edge of the water, I hold 2 lines from Ikkyu in my mouth, make my way slowly. Nights when I shared a bed in a small room, another's body to the left, hooked by a heavy dream. Funny, the way we come to understand a place by wanting to escape it. I can shake out the imprint of my body on the sheets each morning, harder to shake out the mind. When I was 4, I ate spoonfuls of powdered milk straight from the canister. The powder was sweet. There wasn't enough money for fresh milk. 700 years ago, Chang Yang-hao wrote, "All my life seems like yesterday morning." Thank you.
Wow, a button of peanut butter. What a great image. It's an honor to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming. And this book would not exist without Tracy K. Smith's work. And like Jenny said, it's an honor to have gone to school with you. Okay, I'll start my reading with a poem for my grandma. Tu abuelita Nelly. This is my 14th time pressing roses in fake passports. For each year, I haven't climbed Marañón trees. I'm sorry I've lied about where I was born. Today, this country chose its first black president. Maybe he changes things. I've told Mom I don't want to have to choose to get married. You understand. Abuelita, I can't go back and return. There's no path to papers. I've got nothing left but dreams where I am the parakeet nest on the Flor de Fuego, the paper boats we made when streets flooded, or toys I buried by the foxtail ferns. Do you know the ferns I mean? The ones we planted the first birthday without my parents. I'll never be a citizen. I'll never scrub clothes with pumice stones over the big cement tub under the almond trees. Last time you called, you said my old friends think that now I'm from some town between this bay and our estero, and that I'm a coconut, brown on the outside, white inside. Abuelita, please forgive me, but tell them they don't know shit. Of course, I never cursed in front of my grandma. You shouldn't do that. This next one, there's been a lot of, I feel like when you hear Salvadoran or El Salvador, all you hear about is MS-13 and the violence or unaccompanied children. And it's interesting for me, and I wrote this before 45 got into office, but I feel what's missing from the conversation is the humanity of gangsters, because they're people too. And I wouldn't be here talking to you if it weren't for one, whose real name I don't know, but he helped me cross when I was unaccompanied through the Sonoran Desert, and this is for him. And the only I know him by is Chino, and Latinos are racist as fuck, so Chino means Chinese looking. So this is for him. Second attempt crossing for Chino. In the middle of that desert that didn't look like sand and sand only, in the middle of those acacias, whiptails, and coyotes, someone yelled, "La migra," and everyone ran. In that dried creek where 40 of us slept, we turned to each other and you flew from my side in the dirt. Black-throated sparrows and dawn hitting the tops of mesquites. Against the herd of legs, you sprinted back toward me. I jumped on your shoulders and we ran from the white trucks, then their guns. I said, "Freeze, Chino. Para, por favor." So I wouldn't touch their legs that kicked you. You pushed me under your chest, and I've never thanked you. Beautiful Chino, the only name I know to call you by. Farewell, your tattooed chest, the M, the S, the 13. Farewell, the phone number you gave me when you went east to Virginia and I went west to San Francisco. You called twice a month, then your cousin said the gang you ran from in San Salvador found you in Alexandria. Farewell, your brown arms that shielded me then, that shield me now from La Migra. and the wackest review that I've gotten of this book was written by somebody who clearly had been watching too much Narcos or I don't know. Because they didn't understand that don in Spanish is just a sign of respect. It doesn't mean that my grandpa was a gangster, and they said that my grandpa is a gangster. No. He's in the military, which is kind of like a gang. But, so this is in the third person. It's about Don Chepe, my grandpa. Don Chepe. The war is or isn't over, but coffee still brews. Sugar keeps vanishing. He's burned his uniform and never wears boots. His daughters break mirrors on him to save their mother when he returns, waking neighbors, waking his grandson. His hammock is wet, so are his pants. The parakeet, a wind-up clock. His daughters in nightgowns, his grandson in their arms. His black boots don't make towns flee anymore. Don has always been the wrong word. Redacted addresses, 38s, clips in back pockets. To see how many he'll kill, his grandson throws rocks at tadpoles. One by one, his daughters leave. Don has always been what his wife didn't know how to wash from uniforms. His grandson is asked to fetch vodka when Don tries to forget the still-opened eyes. Not even that wakes him. No one can cover mirrors in time. No one can find the scorpion in their shoes. This next one is about another option that immigration officers have, which is not to be dicks, but to break the law. And this is about a nicer Border Patrol agent. So it's not a black and white thing. And this happened a different time. Let me try again. I could bore you with the sunset, the way water tasted after so many days without it, the trees, the breed of dogs, but I can't say there were 40 people when we found the ranch with the thin white men, his dogs, and his shotgun. Until this 5 a.m., I couldn't remember there were only 5 or 7 people. We'd separated by the Palo Verdes. We meaning 4 people, not 40. The rest, I don't know. They weren't there when the thin white man let us drink from a hose while pointing his shotgun. In Pocho Spanish, he told us, "Si correr perros atacar." If run, dogs trained, attack. When La Migra arrived, an officer who probably called himself Hispanic at best, not Mexicano like we called him, said, "Buenas noches," and gave us pan dulce y chocolate. Procedure says he should have taken us back to the station, checked our fingerprints, etc. He must have remembered his family over the border, or the border coming over them, because he drove us to the border and told us, next time, rest at least 5 days. Don't trust anyone calling themselves coyotes. Bring more tortillas, sardines, Alhambra. He knew we would try again and again, like everyone does. And this next one, it's about, so Nogales is a border town split by the fence, and I remember being on the Mexican side of Nogales, looking at the American side, and seeing homeless people go from that side into Mexico to buy food, and then go back into the US side, and they didn't have to show any form of identification. But we couldn't do that. And the title of this is Citizenship. It was clear they were hungry, with their carts empty, the clothes inside their empty hands. They were hungry because their hands were empty, their hands in trash cans. The trash cans on the street, the asphalt street on the red dirt, the dirt taxpayers pay for up to that invisible line, visible thick white paint, visible booths, visible with the fence starting from the booths. Booth, road, booth, road, booth, road, office building, then the fence, 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 fence. It started from a corner with an iron pole, always an iron pole at the beginning. Those men, those women could walk between booths, say hi to white or brown officers, no problem. The problem, I think, were carts, belts, jackets. We didn't have any. Or maybe not the problem. Our skin sunburned, all of us spoke Spanish. We didn't know how they had ended up that way, on that side. We didn't know how we had ended up here. We didn't know, but we understood why they walked the opposite direction to buy food. On this side, we all know is hunger. Doctor's office first week in this country. It's procedure to inspect the ass of an immigrant kid. Undress, put this gown on. The doctor will be here soon. That first day after Sonoran Desert, I showered for hours when we got to parents' apartment. Father showed me the way to turn the knob that first day, how things worked. I hadn't seen him since I was 1. I didn't know him. This is how you make your pee-pee grow, he said, so it's bigger, so it's the biggest. He said, sometime that first month or that first year, pull, I did. Pull, do it now. You're young, it will work, he said. Did anything happen? The doctor asked in front of my parents, then alone. Did anything happen along the way? In Spanish, all of this in Spanish, starting with es procedimiento. This is how you get hot water. Twist, then pull. No, I'd never used a sponge. Soap bar in hand was enough back there next to a well. I'd never seen a shower. Parents said it that way in English, shower. That first shower, my dirt drew a dark rim around the linoleum. You will hear from us next week. I came back for all the necessary shots. I grew up across the street from a clinic. Every kid cried. I came back. I got shot. I didn't cry. I kept turning the wrong knob. Even after Dad showed me, then Mom showed me, then we showered together. To make me comfortable with my own body again, with theirs, with anyone's. It burned that first time. My skin, hot water, nothing happened. It burned, I'm sure, seguro que nada pasó. And I will finally return to my country after 20 years. In the hopes of obtaining a green card. So it's a very scary time for me, and I haven't seen my grandma since I left. And I will see her again. And this is a poem in her voice. So please, if you believe in religion or anything, on June 4th, please send your prayers because that's when my interview is. And this is in my grandmother's voice. Abuelita says goodbye. Javiercito, you're leaving me tomorrow when our tortilla and milk breaths will whisper, te amo. When I'll pray the sun won't devour your northbound steps. I'm giving you this conch swallowed with this delta's waves and a sound of absorbing sand. Hold it to your ear. I'm tired of my children leaving. My love for you shatters windows with birds. Javiercito, let your shadow return alone or with sons, but soon. Call me mama, not abuelita. All my children learn the names of seasons from songs. Tonight, leaves fall. There's no autumn here. When you mist into tomorrow's dawns at the shore of somewhere, listen to this conch. Don't lose me. And I'll end with this poem I wrote when I was not a good place, and it's very dramatic, but I'm a poet, so fuck it. And what you need to know is that in El Salvador, pisar means to fuck, and pito is penis. And Como Tú is a poem by a Salvadoran poet, Roque Dalton. If you don't know his work, Google him. I wouldn't be a poet without him. And I was born in a bay called Estero de Jaltepec. And I'm a huge fan of gin. So, instructions for my funeral. Don't burn me in no steel furnace. Burn me in Abuelita's garden. Wrap me in blue, white, and blue. A la mierda patriotismo. Douse me in the cheapest gin. Whatever you do, don't judge my home. Cut my bones with a machete till I'm fine as dust. Wrap my pito in panties so I dream of pisar. Please. No priests, no crosses, no flowers. Steal a flask and stash me inside. Blast music, dress to impress. Please be drunk, miss work y pisen otra vez. Bust out the drums, the army strums. Bust out the guitars, guerrilleros strummed. And listen to the war inside, please. No American mierdas. Carouse the procession dancing to the pier, moor me in a motorboat, de veras que sea una lancha, driven by a 9-year-old son of a fisherman, scud to the center of the Estero de Jaltepec, read Como Tú, and toss pieces of bread. As the motorboat circles, open the flask. So I'm breathed like a jacaranda, like a flor de mayo, like an alcatraz. Then forget me and let me drift. Gracias.
Thank you. I feel so excited about where poetry is going. These voices are heartening. Maybe I'll start with some poems that are thinking about America, since that has been one of our themes tonight. I wrote this poem thinking about what it feels like to be sometimes a stranger in the place to which you belong, estranged by the perceptions and fears of others. And then I lived with the poem a little while and gave it the title, "The United States Welcomes You." Why and by whose power were you sent? What do you see that you may wish to steal? Why this dancing? Why do your dark bodies drink up all the light? What are you demanding that we feel? Have you stolen something? Then what is that leaping in your chest? What is the nature of your mission? Do you seek to offer a confession? Have you anything to do with others brought by us to harm? Then why are you afraid? And why do you invade our night? Hands raised, eyes wide, mute as ghosts. Is there something you wish to confess? Is this some enigmatic type of test? What if we fail? How and to whom do we address our appeal? You might remember, you must remember the photograph that came out of the Black Lives Matter movement a couple of summers ago, an image called "Unrest in Baton Rouge" of a young woman in a sundress, and the wind is kind of blowing the dress out behind her in this very beautiful way. And then in the other half of the frame, she's being faced off by a number of police officers in combat gear. And it's sort of unforgettable. And it became this iconic image of the movement. And I was asked to write a poem about it, which made me happy because it meant I had to try and employ some vocabulary that wasn't just the instinctive gut response that I had to the image. And I was looking at this sense of visual imbalance, and I was thinking, okay, what is at stake? What are these people who are doing a job they've been told to do? What is the threat that they perceive? And this is the poem that emerged, "Unrest in Baton Rouge." Our bodies run with ink-dark blood. Blood pools in the pavement's seams. Is it strange to say love is a language few practice, but all or near all speak? Even the men in black armor, the ones jangling handcuffs and keys. What else are they so buffered against, if not love's blade, sizing up the heart's familiar meat? We watch and grieve. We sleep, stir, eat, love. The heart sliced open, gutted, clean. Love, naked almost, in the everlasting street, skirt lifted by a different kind of breeze. I think love is the wish that runs through this new book. Love in a way that's different from how I've addressed it in any of my other books, which has either been about, loving a parent who's gone, or loving a, partner, romantic love. But in this book, I find myself really searching for a vocabulary for, loving my neighbor, actually loving my neighbor, or, sort of like a precedent for how to go about enacting compassion, which is so hard. And many of the poems look back toward history, where you don't find quite so many examples of successful, acts of compassion, so much as opportunities where something derailed that possibility. I'm going to read you a poem that comes from a really beautiful history of the Charles Colcock Jones family. The history is called Dwelling Place by the historian and I think religious scholar Erskine Clark. And in that book, he's tracking the, very well-documented history of the Jones family, which was a, slave-owning family. But he also does this thing that a lot of people fail to do because there are fewer resources to turn to, and that's to seek to document the lives of the people enslaved on the plantations that the Joneses owned. And it's a really compelling story. This is a poem that's derived from correspondence written between members of the Jones family about the people that they had enslaved. But what I wanted to hear within that was a sense of the voices of those people enslaved. There's one letter that Mary Jones wrote to her cousin, and she said, while she was away recovering from an illness, "The greatest personal privation I have had to endure has been the want of either Patience or Phoebe." Those were two women that were enslaved to her. "Tell them I am never, if life is spared us, to be without both of them again." So this is a poem that draws from the Jones family's vocabulary, but it's facing the opposite direction. This is what I want to believe might be the voice of Patience or Phoebe speaking. The greatest personal privation. It is a painful and harassing business belonging to her. We have had trouble enough, have no comfort or confidence in them, and they appear unhappy themselves, no doubt from the trouble they have occasioned. They could dispose of the whole family without consulting us, father, mother, every good cook, washer, and seamstress, subject to sale. I believe good shall be glad if we may have hope of the loss of trouble. I remain in glad conscience, at peace with God and the world. I have prayed for these people many, many, very many times. Much as I should miss Mother, I have had trouble enough and wish no more to be only waiting to be sent home in peace with God. In every probability, we may yet discover the whole country will not come back from the sale of parent and child. So far as I can see, the loss is great and increasing. I know they have desired we should not know what was for our own good, but we cannot be all the cause of all that has been done. We wish to act. We may yet, but we have to learn what their character and moral conduct will present. We have it in contemplation to wait and see. If good, we shall be glad. If evil, then we must meet evil as best we can. Father, mother, son, daughter, man. And if that family is sold, please, we cannot. Please, we have got to. Please, the children, mother and father and husband and all of you, all, I have no more. How soon and unexpectedly cut off, many, many, very many times. And this is a poem in what I imagine to be Mary Jones's voice, saying something she never said. It's called Unwritten. Much as I should miss the mother, I am persuaded that we might come to some understanding about a change of investment. I do not wish to influence you in the least degree beyond your own convictions, nor to have you subjected to inconveniences. The loss of the services of a servant is great. But for our own good, we have to answer for all that has happened. Please, all. This is another found poem. It comes from the Declaration of Independence. Declaration. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has plundered our, ravaged our, destroyed the lives of our, taking away our, abolishing our most valuable, and altering fundamentally the forms of our. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. Taken captive on the high seas to bear I think, so America is like on my mind in these poems. And a part of that has, I think, less to do with national identity, with, I don't know, the kind of charge forward into a future that seems like such an American, charge or wish. And so this is a poem, maybe I'll read you this poem that's kind of thinking about the anxieties of modernity, and then a poem that is thinking, just thinking in different terms about what is real and what is possible. This is called Annunciation. And you remember the Annunciation in the Bible is the moment that Mary is greeted by an angel who tells her that she's going to bear the Son of God as her child. And I think this is a poem of, wishing for something to break in and say, this is what will happen. This is what you are here for. Annunciation. I feel ashamed, finally, of our magnificent paved roads, our bridges slung with steel, our vivid glass, our tantalizing lights, everything enhanced, rehearsed, a trick. I've turned old. I ache most to be confronted by the real, by the cold, the pitiless, the bleak, by the red fox crossing a field after snow, by the broad shadow scraping past overhead. My young son, eyes set at an indeterminate distance, ears locked, tuned inward, caught in some music only he has ever heard. Not our cars, our electronic haze, not the piddling bleats and pings that cause some hearts to race. Ashamed, like a pebble, hard and small, hoping only to be ground to dust by something large and strange and cruel. And I think this is a poem that speaks to that large, strange, cruel thing. The angels. Two slung themselves across chairs once in my motel room, grizzled in leather biker gear, emissaries for something I needed to see. I was worn down by an awful panic, a wrenching in the gut, contortions. They sat there at the table while I slept. I could sense them with a deck of playing cards between them. To think of how they smelled, what comes to mind is rum and gasoline. And when they spoke, though I couldn't, I dared not look, I glimpsed how one's teeth were ground down almost to nubs, which makes me hope some might be straight up thugs, young, slim, raw, who bounce and roll with fearsome grace, whose very voices cause faint souls to quake. Quake then, fools, and fall away. What God do you imagine we obey? Think of the toil we must cost them, one scaled perfectly to eternity. And still they come, telling us through the ages not to fear. Just those two, that once, and never again for me since, though there are there sightings, flashes, hints? A proud tree in vivid sun, branches swaying in strong wind, rain hurling itself at the roof, boulders, mounds of earth mistaken for dead does, lions in crouch, a rust-stained pipe where a house once stood, which I take each time I pass it for an owl. Bright whorl, so dangerous and near. My mother sat whispering with it at the end of her life, while all the rooms of our house filled up with night. I visited China for the first time a year ago, and kind of in solidarity with the sense of rootlessness and wandering and discovery that runs through so many of Jenny's poems, I'm going to read a poem that comes out of that trip. It's called Eternity. And I think what moved me was this feeling, maybe it was even wishful, a feeling of discovering or encountering long forgotten parts of myself at different places in this unfamiliar landscape. Eternity. Landscape painting. It is as if I can almost still remember, as if I once perhaps belonged here. The mountains a deep, heavy green, and the rocky, steep drop to the waters below. The peaked roofs, the white plastered brick, a clothesline in a neighbor's yard made of sticks, the stone path skimming the ridge, a ladder asleep against a house. What is the soul allowed to keep? Every birth, every small gift, every ache. I know I have knelt just here, torn apart by loss, lazed on this grass, counting joys like trees, cypress, blue fir, dogwood, cherry, ageless, constant, growing down into earth and up into history. Lama temple, It was a shock to be allowed in, for once not held back by a painted iron fence, and to take it in with just my eyes. No photo signs were discreet, yet emphatic. Coins, bills on a tray. 2 women and then a man bowed before a statue to pray. Outside, above the gates, a sprung balloon and 3 kites swam east on a high, fast current. And something about a bird flapping hard as it crossed my line of sight. The bliss it seemed to make and ride without ever once gliding or slowing. The picture of it meant suddenly youth, and I couldn't help it. I had to look away. Nan Luo Guk Xiang Ali. Every chance I get, every face I see, I find myself searching for a glimpse of myself, my daughter, my sons. More often, I find there former students, old lovers, friends I knew once and had until now forgotten. My sisters, a Russian neighbor, a red-haired American actor, and on, uncannily, as though all of us must be buried deep within each other. Songshuang Art Village. You pull canvases from racks, red daisies, peonies in a blue vase, an urn of lilies like spirits flown from the dead. A self-portrait in a white dress, faceless but for one eye, and all around you what could be empty coffins or guitar cases or dark leaves on a swirling sea. On a column in a black frame hangs a photo of your mother, a smiling girl in an army coat. Can any of us save ourselves, you once wrote, save another? Below her, all beard practically and crevassed brow, Tolstoy stares in the direction of what once must have seemed the future. Mu Tian Yu, Great Wall. Farther ahead, another tourist loses his footing and grabs hold of a brick, which comes off in his hand, crumbles where it lands. I think I'll conclude with a very brief poem. Let's see if I can find it. It's called The Everlasting Self. The everlasting self comes in from a downpour, shaking water in every direction, a collaborative condition, gathered, shed, spread, then forgotten, reabsorbed, like love from a lifetime ago, and mud a dog has tracked across the floor. Thank you.